Hey, welcome to All With Love. Tonight we're going to talk about ancient prophecy in real time. I call it the war against wisdom. Isaiah 5:20 made it very clear. He said, in the end times, good would be considered evil and evil would be considered good. Night would be considered day and day would be considered night. Bitter would be considered sweet and sweet would be considered bitter. This is what we call a war against wisdom. I've talked about it before in slightly different terms when I talk about nutrition, in terms of, again, a lack of wisdom. And we know, for example, when we have a meat-based diet, we're going to have 35 to 50% more diabetes. I call it crimes against wisdom. We know that if you're going to eat meat, you're going to have a research at Harvard with 122,000 people showed that if you're going to eat even good meat, you're going to have 13% increase in cancer, and if you're eating junk food meat, 20% increase in cancer. We know if you have a meat-based diet, you're going to increase your risk of osteoporosis for both men and women by fourfold. So if you choose to do that, you're going to involve in crimes against wisdom. Okay, not really a new idea. Isaiah, maybe in his time it was a new idea for us. But we do have a war against wisdom today. I look around and in my paper on global warming, cycles of global warming and cooling, that's important. Cycles is the key word. For thousands of years, we've had cycles of global warming and cooling based on sunspots, not on industry. And we have now entered a cycle of global cooling starting in 1998. And before that, we actually had global warming. And guess what? In the French Revolution in the 1790s, they had global warming and they had a revolution. And then the French experienced, under Napoleon, the effects of global cooling. And he was frozen out when he attacked Russia because they were admitting global cooling in 2012 and 14 or whatever approximately it was. These are real cycles. There's nothing really new about it. We now know that the Greenland glacier, which was decreasing in size, has now been proven to be increasing in size. It's just the way it is. It's called cycles of global warming and cooling. For thousands of years, nothing new literally under the sun here. And it does depend on sunspots. We have hit our solar minimum. Minimum sunspots, we have global cooling. We'll look at the Midwest from Nebraska all the way into Iowa, and hey, we got 1,000 acres under, a million acres underwater, and we're going to have what happens in global cooling times, famine and difficulty. Nothing new here, okay? What's new only is that people are denying that that's happening. The facts are on the ground. We see in Chicago the coldest winter in 50 years. Chicago was cold to begin with, but it's coldest in 50 years. So here we are, global warming. Now we're hitting global cooling. Nothing new. It's been going on for centuries, these cycles. Now we take a little bit, look a little further, okay? And we have the confusion. Now we're getting historical here, so it becomes more relative, okay? Socialism tends to evolve into fascism. What do I mean? Well, Mussolini was the leading socialist, and as he came into power, he moved into fascism. How did that happen? Well, it was a natural movement because fascism is the use of government force to affect control and affect people's minds. Okay, Hitler did the same thing. National Socialist Workers' Party, Socialist Workers' Party. Ah, but it becomes fascist. Interesting. There's nothing new here. Okay, this is the thing to get. Okay, and now people are talking about, well, we should be socialist and it'd be so good. It just doesn't work out. Look around. No socialist country has succeeded. Oh, how about Denmark, Sweden, and Norway? Well, they're not really socialist countries. Socialism is defined. Okay, it's important that the government owns the production of wealth, the factories and that kind of thing. And in reality, it was a failed experiment in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. But what they are is that they're very affluent welfare states. They're not socialist. So that argument doesn't even hold well. We can look at Venezuela with the top oil resources in the world, or Cuba, and on, where we see it's a failure. Yet, we have war on wisdom. And people are pushing for a certain thing that has not historically worked and tends to move towards fascism. Okay. Fascism is not a leftist, is not a right-wing phenomenon, it's a left-wing phenomenon, and we have historical evidence. We can pretend that isn't happening, but that's the way it is. And so historically, the evidence is there. Doesn't work, and it moves towards a more fascist type situation. Not a right-wing thing, a left-wing thing. Okay, now, more research is coming out. We'll talk about transgenderism. I have taken the Hippocratic Oath. That means you're not supposed to be a hypocrite, I think. And you should do no harm. Research is very clear that people who actually have a switching from male to female or female to male have, at the male to females, it's about 62% have a depression, and the women moving to male, 55% depression, majority. Then the data gets worse. Sweden comes out at the end of a 30-year study and is saying people who actually have a physical, hormonal, chemical, or surgical shift have approximately 20 times, it's hard to admit, 20 times more suicide. That's huge. The head of the National Pediatric Association, Michelle, can't remember her last name, Vettel, basically said, if we start giving, which is happening, hormones for kids at the 8 years old, because that's where it is. There's a research grant that just came out, not just came out, but was discovered, where these people got $5.7 million to start giving hormones to kids who are 8 and 10 years old. And what do we know from that? Well, first of all, hormone therapy is going to quadruple your rate of venous thrombosis. It's going to double your rate of cancer and double your rate of heart disease. I consider that somewhat harmful. Okay? But we're really looking at 19, well, I'm giving two statistics. Sweden says 20 times more suicide for people who've made those transitions. And to me, it's a war on wisdom to think an 8-year-old can make that kind of decision. It's a war on wisdom. We know. I mean, my youngest granddaughter is 8 years old. There's no way that she, at 8. In fact, we know now that actually the brain is still maturing into the early 20s. Some people say into 30. So, and what we know when we look at sexual confusion, which is a real phenomenon, it's been there for thousands of years, really, that 98% of the boys and 88% of the girls end up coming back to their original XX for women and XY chromosome identification sexual confusion, 98% of the boys move back towards a identification with being male, and 88% of the women move back as an identification with being female. So to me, it's a war on wisdom to give hormones to an 8-year-old or do surgery on a 13-year-old girl removing her breast, which is what's being done now. This is a war on wisdom. And as is head of the pediatric association, Michelle Critella, I think her name is. I don't know if I got the last name right. She's saying that's child abuse. But people are trying to justify it. You know, we call PC, which to me is pollution of consciousness at this point, a war on wisdom is being waged, and we need to stand up and speak about it. Now, what's the basis of that? People want to be happy. People want to be happy. People want to do a sex change because they think somehow, you know, cutting off their breasts or putting on an artificial penis is going to make them happy. Guess what? Doesn't work. Why? Because the ultimate ignorance, the ultimate war on wisdom, to think somehow doing something on the outside is going to make you happy. Ancient spiritual wisdom, this is my point of where we're really going here, okay, is that by meditating and focusing on the divine within yourself, we get filled with non-causal joy and non-causal peace and non-causal love and non-causal witness, which is the real source of happiness. God dwells within you as you. And so it's even more of a war on wisdom to think we can do outer things to be happy, and it doesn't work if you got 20 times more suicide or 9 times more people kind of, without doing the physical, hormonal, or surgery, 9 times more suicidal tendencies. Doesn't work because that's not where happiness comes from. Not by a particular gender, one way or another. Happiness comes from knowing the light of God within yourself. So may we be blessed not to be seduced or coerced by the war against wisdom, and know God was within us as the spark of the divine within all of us, and tapping into that non-causal love, non-causal joy, non-causal peace is the real answer for true and independent happiness and joy and love in our life. May you be blessed with these teachings. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Takiwas. Amen.